everyone, today we are starting in earnest our deep dive look into the Exiles and Partisans deck. And what better place to start than the eponymous Partisan Cards. I wanted to start with the Partisan Cards, not just because the name Partisan is right there, and therefore it kind of encapsulates the entire deck as a theme, but also because this is one of the most interesting group of cards in the game. And that's because the decisions that it opens up are really rich, and they provide this sort of double-edged sword of, if I use it, it's really powerful, but it comes with some drawbacks. And when to use it and how is a very interesting decision, and that's part of why the Partisans deck is a little bit more strategically interesting than the base deck, in my opinion. So let's get right into it. Here's one example of the mouse version of Partisan Cards. As you can see, the mouse version is a mouse suited card. It requires one mouse crafting piece in order to craft, and the text reads, "In battle in mouse clearings, may deal 1 extra hit, then discard all your cards except mice." And the fox version will be exactly the same, only it'll be fox suited, fox crafting requirement, and it'll be in battle in fox clearings, and then discard all your cards besides foxes. So there is one of each suit. So there's one fox version, one rabbit version, and one mouse version for a total of 3 partisan cards. And because they sort of replace the favor cards, it adds a lot more crafting value to each suit, right? Because you could draw a favor of the foxes, but if you don't even have one fox crafting piece, or maybe you do have one, you're just so far away from being able to craft favor of the foxes that you might just end up using it as a suit. But because the partisan cards are way easier to craft, you'll just see a lot more crafting as a result of the fact that all the cards are just more in range. And it's another reason I like Exiles and Partisans a lot, because crafting just happens more naturally. So these are both offensive and defensive. Notice that I said not in battle as attacker, in battle as defender, it's just in battle. So in that way, these cards kind of fill the niche of both brutal tactics as well as sappers, where you're dealing extra hits, but it is limited to the suit of the clearing, right? So you can't just do it everywhere. It's only in rabbit clearings if you have the rabbit suited partisan card. And the trade-off is very interesting. Rather than giving a point or just discarding the card, you can use it as many times as you want, but you have to give up all of your cards that don't match the suit. And this includes bird cards. I see this question coming up a lot, like, do I discard bird cards for partisans? Aren't they wild? Don't I just get to treat the birds as whatever suit I want? That's not specifically how it works. Unfortunately, you do have to discard the bird cards. And that's because in the law, there's a rule that says forced effects. And if you're ever prompted to discard a specific suit, for example, if I use rabbit partisans, I'm prompted to discard foxes and mice, and therefore I must treat the bird card as a fox or mouse, and therefore discard it. Think of it as the same as when the Woodland Alliance loses a base, right? They lose all their supporters that match the suit of the base, as well as their bird cards. So that's how it works. So it's a very big payment, a very big penalty for using the card, but you have to evaluate that against the advantage that you gain by dealing the extra hits. And one of those is on defense. It will discourage people from attacking you. At first they might say, do I really want to attack this player in a mouse clearing, knowing that I might have to take an extra hit? That first time that you get attacked in mouse, there's going to be that question. Are they willing to discard half of their hand or a whole bunch of cards from their hand in order to deal an extra hit? You know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to attack you. And then you use the partisan card, and then that player and every other opponent's going to say, oh man, the partisans player already paid the cost. They've already ditched their hand down to only their mouse cards. Now there's no reason not to use partisans again and again. So that's going to really discourage them from going after your warriors or your infrastructure in mouse clearings, knowing that the first time you use a partisan card is a bit of a question. But if you already use it, any repeated partisan cards, you're basically not paying that cost again and again, because it's no new cards have entered your hand unless somebody somehow gave you a card. All right, so that could be really deadly. The fact that repeated uses don't cost you any extra. There are big drawbacks to using the partisan cards, and that's that it filters your hand. As soon as you use it, all the opponents know, okay, interesting. You kept 2 cards, meaning you only have 2 mouse cards. If they're clever, they could use that information and sort of map out what you'll be able to do on your turn. So the Eyrie, for example, they'll say, okay, well, you only have a mouse card in your hand, therefore a mouse card's going into your decree this turn, so we can attack you or do something to cause a problem for your decree, knowing that a mouse has to enter your decree. So keep that informational edge that you're giving to your opponents in mind, that it is filtering your hand that way. And it's also very telling if you choose not to use the partisan card. If I attack you and you say, I'd rather not use my partisan card, I know that you have something in your hand. Maybe it's a bird card that you need for some reason, or it's a really powerful crafted card. Whatever it is, I can now start to deduce, okay, what is so important in your hand that you are not willing to use the partisan card to throw it away? And again, clever opponents can use that information against you. So this is one of the rare cards that when you craft it, it does come with this sort of double-edged sword that it's very powerful, but whether you use it or you don't, there are certain liabilities. And I just think that makes this card extra interesting, if not always the greatest card in the deck. And the Sabo ability of the card is moderate. Sabo ability is this term I'm coining, meaning if I have saboteurs, how likely am I to use my saboteurs to destroy this card? In this case, it's a little bit questionable, because if I'm not a very up-in-your-face combat faction, I might say, well, that partisan card's probably not getting used against me, and it looks like you're using that partisans to do damage against my other opponent, I'll let you keep it. But on the other hand, if I have no choice to come and battle you, I'd rather not be forced to deal with the partisan card, or if you're going to use it to go for the win on the next turn, right? It's situational, but a saboteur's card might sometimes end up being used to kill a partisan card. Some cards are more saboable, some are less, but we're rating this for now as moderate. And this is where you guys can jump in the comments and tell me, no, I would never use my saboteur's card on a partisan. So let me know what you guys think. I'm rating it personally as moderate Sabo ability. So the first faction, as always, is going to be the Marquise de Cat. How good is a partisan card for the cats? So cats hate wasted battles. How many times have you been in a situation where you say, okay, I just need to roll a 2 in this battle in order to open up a building slot and be able to plant my building there. So you battle and you roll 1-0. Excellent. Ugh. Cats have such precious action economy that any battle where you're not dealing the number of hits you need is just super painful, unlike other factions that can deal repeated battles and it's not a big deal. Having a partisan card to just give you that little extra certainty that you're going to deal the damage you need is really nice. But you might end up losing some cards that you need. Fortunately, the cats are able to do a whole bunch of things with their cards before initiating battles. So if you have bird cards you'd like to use for an extra action, you can spend them first, right? I've got 2 bird cards. Okay, first I'm going to spend them, and then I'm going to start initiating battles in this clearing in order to not waste them if I want to use the partisan card. Also, it's nice that your crafting step happens before you would be doing any battles. So on your own turn, you can make use of the cards in your hand before you would have to discard them. On defense, it's a little bit different. Sure, it does make your buildings less appealing, right? If I've got 3 warriors defending 2 buildings, but I also have a partisan card that matches, my opponents will go, not only am I going to have to chew through those 3 warriors, but I might end up taking a lot of losses if they want to use that partisan card. So you can sort of deflect aggressive attention away from yourself using a partisan card. But it's often a bluff that you're not willing to actually execute and go follow through on, because at the end of your turn, you'll draw up a bunch of cards, probably one, or if you're really lucky, two bird cards, and then are you really going to want to spend them to deal an extra hit on defense and then not have that bird card on your next turn? So for that reason, the Cats often will choose not to use a partisan card on defense and would rather wait until their turn to actually start getting the value out of them. But cards are often disposable for the Marquise de Cat on their own turn, because if I can't craft it and it's not a bird card, do I really care that much about keeping this fox card that I can't craft anyway? Sure, I could use it down the line for a field hospitals, but you can at least plan your turns around that. It does limit your ability to use field hospitals, and for that reason you have to be really careful. I had a big flub one time where I used a partisan card on defense, but the card did not match my keep, so I used a rabbit partisan card as an example. But my keep was in a mouse clearing, and my opponents were able to go, oh, so you have no mouse or bird cards in order to protect your keep using field hospitals, huh? And I thought, oh no. So they were able to just go into my keep and battle me 2 times or so and just wipe away everything, knowing with certainty that I couldn't protect my keep using field hospitals. So just pay attention to that. A partisan card that matches the keep is way more valuable than the other two, right? So be careful if the keep does not match the partisan card. And I'm going to rate this as an A tier card for the Cats. And that's mostly for those advantages that I talked about at the beginning, being able to have surety of the battle efficiency that you're about to undergo, as well as the Cat's ability to use their cards before initiating battles so that they get maximum value out of their own actions. So A tier for the Cats, in my opinion. The Eyrie also has really good utility for the cards, and that's because they're often empty-handed, right? So in Birdsong, you're going to put a card into the decree, and then maybe you craft the other card, maybe not. But the Eyrie just doesn't have a lot of cards in hand. Oftentimes, you'll start executing the decree without a single card in your hand, and therefore the cost of using a partisan card could be nothing. And as a faction that actually does a lot of battles, that can be extremely powerful. And one thing that it can be powerful for is to open up building slots to ensure that you don't fail the decree, right? If there's the only option is to build in this clearing, but it's defended by 2 warriors, you can say, well, across 2 battles with a partisan card, I'm almost guaranteed to open up that clearing and get at the building slot so I can plant my roost. So anything that helps you execute the decree, especially a build order, is going to be extremely powerful for the Eyrie. Also, having that battle edge will give you the ability to rule more. So maybe you already have an open building slot and you just have to make sure that you rule the clearing after your battles are said and done. And think about this. The commander already deals an extra hit. So commander with a partisan card can deal a maximum or at least 5 hits should you roll a 3 and you have 3 warriors. That is unreal amounts of damage and destruction if you're using the commander in the late game. But again, here's that double-edged sword. You have to be aware of emergency orders. So let's say that you have a fox and a bird card, and you have mouse partisans. If you use your mouse partisans, you'll have to get rid of the entirety of your hand. If you start your turn as the Eyrie with no cards in your hand, the first step of Birdsong, something you kind of ignore most of the time, is that you have to draw a card from the deck. And the reason is because you have to put something in the decree. So you draw a card from the deck, and that's the card that's going into the decree. It could be a card you really don't want, like a rabbit card that you can't accomplish this turn because of the suit layout. So just be aware of having few cards going into your turn, right? If you have a matching card and you know what's going into the decree, that's fine. But just be aware of that you might severely limit your ability to choose what you want to put into the decree, as well as filtering your hand like what we talked about. If everyone knows, oh, the Eyrie 100% only have rabbit cards in their hand, that means a rabbit card's going into the decree. That means, oh, we can just cut them off from rabbit clearings and they'll turmoil on move or battle or something like that. If you can use rule or lizards or snares or something to lock them off from the clearing where you know they have to go. But again, that's a very galaxy brain kind of strategy. I'm going to rate Partisan Cards as an S tier because this is one of the most aggressive factions. Being able to deal extra hits is just so much more valuable than factions like the Lizards or someone who's not doing a lot of battles. So you're just going to get so much utility out of these cards as the Eyrie Dynasties. S tier. Woodland Alliance. Woodland Alliance is on the opposite end of the spectrum where they are not very aggressive. If you're going to use this card at all, it's mostly going to be on defense because the Woodland Alliance almost never attacks. I think 70-75% of every Woodland Alliance game I play, I never am the one to roll the dice. I just move, organize, recruit, stuff like that. Battling is something you almost never want to do as the Woodland Alliance because it's just not a very valuable use of your actions. However, there are instances where you would want to battle, and that's one of those times where an opponent might move a whole stack of warriors over top your base in order to trap your warriors so you do not rule and you can't move out. And in those situations, Partisan Cards really work out great because in daylight you can train, you can craft, you can mobilize, you can get rid of all the cards in your hand. So by the time you do your battles in evening, your hand's already empty. So that timing of using your cards in daylight to the point where you actually do start battling is really valuable. So you can recruit a bunch of warriors at your base and then battle your way out using the Partisan card. So in the rare cases you do have to battle, it's a great card to have. But like I said, it's mostly going to get used on defense. Let's say someone's coming to attack one of your sympathy tokens or they want to take a swing at your base. Your hand cards are usually really important. This is a faction that really cares about cards because the more cards they have, they can throw into supporters or craft, the more they can spread and advance their engine. So having to give up 1 or 2 or even 3 cards from their hand in order to deal an extra hit is going to be pretty costly. And that's one of those times where if you say, I'm not going to use my Partisan card, thank you very much, everyone at the table goes, oh, really? No Partisan card? That means it's open season on all the other tokens because they clearly have something in their hand they want to protect. And if they don't use Partisans on that first battle, they ain't going to use it on the second battle or the third battle. So there you go. It's one of those times you are going to have to give up a little bit of information once you craft this card. But I still think it's decent for some of those reasons. If you're willing to use it, that's fine. But it's just not as good for Woodland Alliance as other factions because A, cards are so important, and B, because we're just not engaging in offense often enough to get a lot of value out of this. I might just mobilize it, or if the card matches a base, I'm using a Partisan card to train and get another officer. It is what it is. Vagabond. Vagabond's a little bit weird because there are so many different Vagabond characters that all have different primary strategies, right? The Vagrant that I have in this picture here is not the most combat efficient build. However, if you're going with Arbiter or Ranger or Harrier, a Vagabond character that's primarily relying on infamy points, this can be a hugely powerful card because you can get 2 or 3 swords really easily and then just start swinging and dealing tons of infamy, tons of hits, and just cleaning up the entire game really quickly. It works obviously much better in regular infamy than despot infamy, which is what a lot of the competitive scene is working with nowadays. But if you're ever playing with normal rules, a Partisan card on a sword-heavy Vagabond is just unbelievably broken. And the nice thing is, as a Vagabond, our hand is usually pretty disposable. All right, what do we really do with our hand cards? We aid them to get some points and items from our opponents, and we could craft something, especially if it's an item, But other than that, a lot of the time I look at my hand and go, I have no plans for anything to do with this hand, so why not just throw them away in order to deal extra hits against my infamy target. All right. Now, the other nice thing is on defense. Because we don't care tremendously about our hand, this is going to make it more punishing for an opponent who wants to forest us. So if I am doing really well, the table's going to say, well, we have to send them to the forest. We have to go and bust up their items. You can come after me. But as long as I end my turn in a matching clearing that matches my partisan card, I'm just going to make sure that you pay for sending me to the forest. So I think it's an A tier card for most Vagabonds. Sometimes you're not really going to care about it. Obviously, if you're a Vagabond that's doing aid farming, like the Vagrant or maybe a wonky Harrier build or the Adventurer if you get coins. But if you're doing an aid strategy where you don't have a sword, then you probably aren't even going to want to use this to begin with. So it's going to depend on which Vagabond class you are, but I'm still going to rate it as A because it's very efficient. And it's only one crafting cost, meaning you only have to exhaust one hammer to have this power probably for good. Other powers that have 2 crafting cost or even 3, even if the ability were good, it's just way too much of your action economy as the Vagabond to be worth it. But for one single hammer, I'll take it. Next up is the Lizard Cult. Unfortunately, everything that we do practically depends on our hand, and we need a diversity of suits in our hand, so activating a partisan card is just, it's a little too costly for what you get for it. What I will say is that if you happen to craft League of Adventurous Mice, there is this cool interaction where you could say, okay, I reveal my hand cards. All right, I do my recruit, I score, I build a garden, I do what I do with my hand. Now my hand is empty. They're all in my play area because I've revealed them. If you have League of Adventurous Mice, that will allow you to exhaust an item and do a battle. And if you have a partisan card, you can choose to use a partisan card in that battle and not have to discard your hand. Well, you would discard your hand, but all the cards you have are revealed. Revealed cards are not in your hand. So this is a little edge case that I might make a short about at some point, but yeah, just remember that. It's a specific example because you need League of Adventurous Mice and a partisan card for this to be relevant, but yeah, just remember that your revealed cards are not technically in your hand. Thing is, you can craft this. Lizards have no problem crafting this card if it happens to match their outcast suit, but our enemies are just going to know that I'm not going to use it. I mean, what am I going to do? Throw away 4, 5 of my cards to deal 1 extra hit? That's basically sacrificing your whole next turn for the sake of spite or something. So yeah, for most other factions, it is a pretty good deterrent, but if I'm looking at a Lizards player and I want to go after those gardens and they have a partisan card, I'm just going to ignore it because I'm calling that bluff. They are not going to use it. Ooh, word got cut off there. But partisan cards can be useful against the Lizards in order to swing the outcast suit. A lot of the time, your faction might not have the best tools to rapidly discard cards in order to swing the outcast. Let's say I'm the Riverfolk Company, which is the next faction we're going to talk about. If I have 3 Fox cards, I don't necessarily have the ability to just discard all of them all at once in order to put them into the Lost Souls and swing the outcast over to Fox. But if I have a partisan card, I can say, okay, well, I'm just going to do this battle, deal an extra hit with a partisan card, and throw away all these Fox cards. And you can exert a lot of agency over the Lost Souls using a partisan's battle. So this is an important facet of playing against the Lizards, not necessarily as the Lizards with a partisan card. So I'm going to rate this as a C. I was considering rating it as a D, but I can imagine there being certain situations where you might want to use it. It's probably something I'm going to spend rather than craft. However, the reason I gave it a C is just because it's one of those why not. If you're in a situation where you've dom swapped, you spent the rabbit dominance for 2 points, and I still have a rabbit partisans that I use to recruit or something, if I'm going to discard cards anyway, I might as well craft something. It might come in handy. So if that's the only reason it's not a D or an F, just because you can craft it pretty easily and it might come in handy. And the next up is Riverfolk Company. So Riverfolk is going to have to seek out a lot of points from cardboard because they only have 18 points on their physical board. So some points are going to have to come from crafting items, and a good number are probably going to come from battles. And those battles are going to be a lot more efficient if you're able to deal extra hits. And like I said, it's an easy way to purge your hand, not just for affecting the lost souls if the lizards happen to be in the game, but let's say that you have a whole bunch of cards that you can't use, but you also don't want your opponents to buy. In the late game, you might really want to have no cards in your hand ending your turn, because even if you price everything at 4, if you have a bird card and you just can't discard it very easily, the Cats player can say, okay, well, I'm going to give you all of my funds, buy that bird card, and use it to win. Being able to have more immediate control over your hand as the Riverfolk Company and just say, okay, I'm now discarding everything I have. You cannot buy any cards from my hand. You don't get that benefit of extra cards on your turn. That could be really powerful. So keep that in mind as a sort of side effect of the Riverfolk Company having a partisan card. And a side effect of the fact that you have an open hand is that it's pretty obvious when you will and won't use it. Right? If I'm looking at the Riverfolk Company and I see, oh, you have coins and tea and propaganda bureau in your hand, you're not going to use that partisan card on me. Your hand is way too good. So that openness of the information also makes it very obvious. Well, I can go after your trade post, I can go punch your otter ball, and you either won't use the partisan card on me, or I can pressure you into discarding all of those valuable cards in your hand. So that's a consequence of it. And it might force you to play a slightly different game plan. Once you start getting a partisan card or two, maybe you'll think, okay, my strategy is now going to pivot towards violence more so than just gathering up a bunch of cards and hoping to craft on future turns. So those are two sort of intermingling paths as the Riverfolk Company, and partisan cards definitely sway you a little bit more on the path of violence. Yeah. The nice thing is that because you have such direct control over your card draw, you can say, well, because I'm veering into this violent path, I'm just going to not draw cards this turn, and therefore come after me. You know that I'm going to use that partisan card because I don't have anything in my hand to discard. So for that, we're going to give it an A rating. This is a really good card for the Riverfolk Company. Maybe even S. It just depends on the situation and the matchup. But I'm going to give it an A for now. Very good card if you can get that to happen. For the Underground Duchy, similar to the Lizards, your cards are just too important. Right? If I'm going to go after and hit the Duchy, I know that they might have to discard 1 or 2 cards. That one, even one card might be the difference between swaying a noble or a lord and swaying a squire or nothing that turn. So I, as a Duchy opponent, I'm probably not going to have any concerns about attacking the Duchy, even if they have a partisan card, because 9 out of 10 times they're just going to say, well, I'm just not going to use it, right? Cards are just too valuable for the Lizards and as well the Underground Duchy. And of course the timing is not great, even if we're going to use it on our own turn, because even though the Duchy can conduct a lot of battles, right? If they have the Brigadier and the Mayor, you can go and battle 3-4 times, but all those cards in your hands have to stay there because the sway step happens after the battle step. So yeah, it's just, it doesn't synergize with the timing the way that it does for the Cats or the Woodland Alliance that can make use of all their cards before the step where they would do the battling. So I'm going to give this a C. Just like the Lizard Cult, there are situations where you can get it, but most of the time this is just going to be a card you don't end up using. So we're giving it a C. We're reserving the F tier for cards that just don't even work at all. For example, Corvid Planners for the Corvid Conspiracy is just an F tier card. But D is a card that's just like really bad, but I could think of one situation where it would be useful. So I'm going to give that one a C. For the Corvid Conspiracy, it's a little bit different. The Corvids already have an ability to deal extra hits on defense, as long as there's a face-down plot, and that's embedded agents. So imagine this. You have a face-down plot token in a Fox clearing, and you have Fox Partisans, meaning that if an enemy wants to come and attack and remove your face-down plot, which is how you score a lot of points, they might have to contend with the near certainty of taking 2 additional hits for their efforts. And if they're not successful on the first battle, let's say if you defended it really well with 2 or 3, probably 3 warriors, they're going to have to probably deal enough hits and then take 4 hits just for the attempt at removing your plot token. So partisan cards can really make Corvid plots a lot scarier. And if you're going to be using the partisan cards on offense, the Corvids have mechanisms to use the cards before they engage in their battles, right? You craft in Birdsong, you recruit in Birdsong, and then in Daylight you go around doing your battles. And if you were wise, you can use your cards before you do the battles and then take those relatively low cost partisan uses and get some more cardboard points for that. Just like the Marquise de Cat, the Corvids are on a very tight budget of actions, so every battle where we whiff the roll is just, it's painful. So being able to do an attack where you're pretty guaranteed to deal 2 or on a good day 3 or 4 hits is just going to be really nice and a good way to make your turns more efficient. And something that people might not realize is the Corvids are very battle friendly. They need to get a few extra points from cardboard here and there, especially in games where your opponents are really good and they're not just going to let you flip 10, 15 plots to get all the way to the end. They're going to remove your plots. You won't be able to get every point that you need just from crafting and flipping plots, so you have to actually get out there and seek out easy, cheap victory points that are lightly defended by using your battles. And with a partisan card, those battles just become a lot better, and they can be even more well defended, knowing that you'll be able to deal an extra hit to get that victory point. And some little tiny consequence or a result of going with a combat-oriented partisan strategy is that you might need to rely on having an extortion plot for a while. And that's because if you're just going to be dropping cards left and right to deal those extra hits, you might need to have an income of 2 cards minimum, maybe even 3, as you continue running around, because even though the Corvids don't look at their hand as this precious resource where their entire turn depends on it, you still want to have options for where you're going to recruit. Are you going to be able to craft something? So drawing 1 card per turn and then losing a card or 2 per turn for partisans is really costly. So just think about having enough cards going into your next turn when you're playing the Corvids with a partisan bent. So we're going to give this an A tier, an A grading for the Corvids. I think this is a great pairing in particular. And speaking of needing to rely on victory points for through violence, we have the most aggressive faction in the game, the Lord of the Hundreds. This is the most combat-oriented faction, and as a result, you're going to be wanting to deal as many extra hits as possible to scoop up those victory points. And just like the Eyrie, you might not even have a single card in your hand as you begin the attacking part of your turn. Maybe you've crafted some cards, or you've spent a card in your command step in order to build a stronghold, and then you go advancing the Warlord. By that point, you might not have any cards in your hand, and therefore the repeated partisan usage can just be completely cost-free. So that feels good, doing a partisan card where you're dropping nothing. And if you ever need to use looters to get an item, remember, when you use looters, you don't deal rolled hits, but you do deal extra hits. So imagine that, a situation where you are able to say, okay, I just need to rule the clearing after this battle, but I still get to deal a hit against you. it just adds to that certainty that looters is going to work out in your favor, especially when comboed with something like Wrathful or Stubborn. Just like the commander, Wrathful gives you an extra hit on attack, and with a Partisan card, that's 2 extra hits. Oh man, it just it's so painful to be on the receiving end of an angry warlord that's both wrathful and has partisans. And having Stubborn, though it doesn't deal extra hits, it just means that you're not facing the brunt or the drawback of engaging in lots of battles. So you'll just be dealing a lot of extra hits and taking fewer hits when you're pairing it with Stubborn. So just all around a great combo between faction and partisans, maybe one of the best because of the already poor card draw and the amount of times you're going to be engaging in battle. So I give it an S tier. Also, not to mention, if someone comes and attacks you trying to remove your warlord or your strongholds, if you don't even care that much about your hand, you're way more free to use this card on defense, because it's not like it's the lizards where you just won't be able to do anything with your turn, or the cats who are giving up a precious bird card. So the warlord's one of those factions that has very little cost to using it on offense or on defense. Very nice. But on the opposite end of the spectrum of that, we have the Keepers in Iron, one of the most card hungry, if not the most card hungry faction in the game. Now what's nice is when you're using it on offense on your own turn, the Keepers in Iron have mechanisms by which they can use their cards before you arrive at the daylight step where you would be doing battling. So you can encamp and then recruit. You can spend the cards you would lose for your partisan card to recruit or to craft something. So at least there's that. At least you can use your cards before you would lose them for partisans. And for that reason, partisans are better on offense. It means that your delve actions are going to be more secure, right? Just like looters, you're going to battle and you have to rule the clearing after the battle. So being able to sort of push the numbers more in your favor via an extra hit is just chef's kiss. Very nice. So this is a really powerful card to have on offense. And in my tournament game as the Keepers in Iron, I had Fox Partisans, and I used it to great effect, not just to police, but I believe to increase my certainty with my delve actions as well. The drawback of this is that you just have to plan that if you're going to use a partisan card, you're probably not going to have as many cards going into evening, which is when you would restock the retinue. So there are going to be plenty of turns where you just need more cards in your retinue, and you have bird cards. So you'll be going and attacking and just saying, well, I'm not going to use the partisan card this turn, because you have to save those cards for evening to then add more cards and more actions for future turns. For this reason, you probably won't see Keepers in Iron using this card too often on defense, just because bird cards are so important and card volume is also so important. But for how good this card is on offense, I'm still going to give it an A rating. This is a good one to have if you can get it. Also, just the fact that it's not a bird card means that it's not too painful to craft. It's not like I desperately need this rabbit card for something else. Unless you're recruiting, I'm very happy to just say, okay, well, I'll craft this card. Keepers in Iron often end up with 4 or even more crafted improvements just off to the side of their board, just waiting for some niche opportunity to arise, and they'll just have it in the back pocket. So this is one of those great cards to have. And my final thoughts on the partisan cards is it's one of the few cards that when you craft it, there are those drawbacks that I was talking about at the beginning. The informational edge that you're giving your opponents, and the fact that you would be filtering your hand should you use it, or giving up the knowledge that you have something good in your hand should you not use it. So just be careful of that. Be careful of which faction you are. The cards are not equally good for every faction, right? Some cards are going to be really good for the cats, really not so good for the Woodland Alliance. And this is why I want to talk about each card against each faction in a lot of detail. All right, so it's potentially extremely powerful if you're a faction that does engage in repeated battles and has a way of not really caring about card discard. This can just be unbelievably dangerous. It's often compared to brutal tactics and sappers, where in the base deck you have Brutal Tactics, that's the offensive extra hits at the cost of giving more points, and Sappers, which is the defensive extra hits, but then it's just one-time use and the card goes away. Partisans is much better than both. You are suit limited, but being able to do this again and again and again without just giving victory points to your target, or without having to say, okay, well, I'm just discarding the Sappers, which was a bird card, probably better off as a bird card anyway. This makes it really, really powerful, but that drawback means that judging when the best time to use it is going to be really key for good players to know when it's time to use it and when it's time to not use it. And strong players are going to be able to take really good advantage of the Partisan cards, and this is part of why the Exiles and Partisans deck rewards experience, it rewards practice, it rewards really thinking deeply about each of your card uses, and that's why the Partisan cards are among some of my favorite in the deck. So thank you very much. Those are my thoughts on Partisans. Let me know in the comments if you have additional thoughts, considerations, and I'll see you guys next time.